welcome to another episode of Fujoshi Commentary. I've changed my name to Mama Fujoshi because everybody calls me that, so why not? And today I want to talk about an anime that I personally have been eager to see if this dub is worthwhile. Recently, as you may or may not know, I went to Anime Week in Atlanta and I found all sorts of cool trinkets and a lot of things. It wasn't a lot of BL stuff like it was last year, but I did manage to, in the dealer's room and the Super Happy Fun sale, pick up this beautiful gem, No Kusabi. And as a lot of you may or may not know, I'm a huge fan of No Kusabi. I have the novel. I did about a piece of a chapter of No Kusabi as like a sort of audiobook test thing I did on my channel. I am a huge fan of the original 1990 anime, and I'm also a pretty big fan of the 2012 anime adaptation. I wish they would have continued it all the way to the end, like the early 90s one, but unfortunately they didn't. But recently I did say in one of my Yaoi news updates that No Kusabi was getting an English dub adaptation and that Todd Haberkorn was set to be one of the main cast vocals, you know, added to the dub. And I was pretty excited. There was also a preview that they gave on a test run of the dub and it looked pretty solid, at least Todd Haberkorn's type. And I just wanted to talk about my thoughts, some of the positives and the negatives that I thought about it, and basically get some feedback from you guys as to what you thought. I am relentlessly on the search for a very decent dub of at least one or two yaoi. Like, I think Gravitation's dub is pretty decent, even though it does kind of cringe. At least they stay faithful to the original script. And for a 7th grade teacher, the voice actor of Shuichi Shindo is very energetic and gives it his 300%, as well as the dub for Fake, the OVA, and I really enjoyed that one. It was pretty solid, and I just feel like we need to have more of that in the recent 2000s. The Yuri on Ice dub kind of irritated me just because the Russian accents just sound so fake in their Russian accent, which is weird because Jerry Jewell is a very decent voice actor, and I believe he's the dub of Russia from Italia, and it didn't seem as fake to me with his dub versus this one. It was really weird. I just didn't like the dub, but again, I'm not a huge fan of Yuri on Ice to begin with, so the dub kind of just solidified my nah sort of status. But without further ado, guys, let's get grooving, humans. So to begin, the sub-wise, it's pretty flawless. There are a few ihs here and there and a few perspectives they changed in the story which do play a huge role in how the dub was framed. Now, if you're trying to compare this dub to wanting to be the 1990 version anime, you're gonna be sorely disappointed, like I sort of was. Now, these dialogues within them just feel weird. Now, I will say, I will give the positives first. Kudos, awesome job to Todd Haberkorn, as well as Chuck Huber and some of the other voices that I heard in here that were just phenomenal. They were so well to their craft. Now, while I'm used to Yasun Mink's voice being a sort of solemn but sort of middle to the age alto, kind of leaning into tenor sort of voice, I'm using like singing vocals instead of like actual good vocalization terms here. I'm used to his voice being monotone but not too deep, just like the 90s version. I was very pleased with how Todd Haberkorn's sort of take on Yasun's voice in a much deeper and more cold and slicing, menacing sort of tone, particularly in his scenes where he has to punish Riki and things like that. And I was very satisfied with that overall. Now, as far as the main protagonist, of course, Riki, I thought his voice was extremely weak. His voice itself is not the issue, it is the way the voice actor delivers his lines. His lines are either very weak in delivery, where it's not as strong as you'd like it to be, or it's either just kind of, I guess, based on the writing or how someone who created the script for the dub didn't make it very specific as to how he's supposed to act or sound in the dub. It sounded very weak, which is very common with a lot of these yaoi dubs like Dramatical Murder. The voices were extremely flat, and that's pretty much all I can say for the rest of the cast. The only exceptions I'll give are most of the blondies in the scenes, and I love how in one particular scene in, I believe, the second episode, when the first encounter encounter with Yasun where he meets Jupiter and she issues him a warning, that whole set of dialogue from that beginning all the way through the end of that sequence was completely just added in, as opposed to the sub it being completely silent, which I'm very, very grateful for. That is actually a really good perspective into one of the things that in both the 90s adaptation and the sub of the 2012 adaptation really was kind of a thing that it was implied by the audience but not really spoken of, how, spoiler alert, the sort of blondies had this whole thing where they felt like Jupiter favored Yasun over everyone else, where you could literally have this mongrel and there was no repercussion as to anybody else would probably have gotten the boot a long time ago. And I love that sort of dialogue that they had, especially since the dialogue was good and the characters portrayed in that were portrayed properly as to their tone. It didn't actually bother me that there was one particular blondie, the one with the eyebrows a little shortened and has his sort of hair back in like an elfish shape. He was voiced by a woman, which I didn't really mind all that much. I thought was actually a good addition, because in the Japanese VA he's got like a male voice, but this one seemed like a mother sort of sisterish kind of voice, or so high-pitched that he was just kind of essentially sounded like a woman, which I thought was a pretty good addition. They did some really good things with the dub here. I have to say, also, I believe it is Raoul. Raoul's voice actor was Chuck Huber, and I thought Chuck Huber did a fantastic job of portraying Raoul. His voice wasn't exactly like the 90s or the 2000 anime, but at the same time it was really good. And there was only so much you could kind of work with the 2012 adaptation, so I was super blown away by how great that performance is, considering Raoul is a significantly small character in the anime adaptation. He's kind of the influencer of Yasun, but at the same time he's not really like a huge thing. He kind of acts as Yasun's confidant, which was amazing. I just loved that. His voice, I automatically knew it was his voice, but it wasn't like, I didn't feel like any of his other characters like Stein or the coach from Big Wind Up. It wasn't like that. It was his own interpretation, and I could feel Raoul as he was speaking. It was an amazing sort of thing. And I also enjoyed Kiri's voice actor, which was, I believe, Brian Bogus. Brian Bogus was a great interpretation of Kiri, how he's very arrogant. He thinks he's more than what he is, despite living in the slums in the same exact place that Riki and the rest of Bison have. It was very, very good interpretation of how he was, how he's super ambitious, and he's sort of like a current Riki before he left to Eos in like 3 years prior. It was a great interpretation, and I personally loved it. He really had that emotion, and I was very, very pleased with it. Now, when it comes to in the middle, I would say Guy is pretty in the middle as far as his voice actor. Rico Fajardo was his voice actor, and I love kind of how they interpreted it, because in this 2012 adaptation, Guy is seen as more as a friend, more of a really close best friend who really worries about Riki, and it's not like the more romantic aspect that they made in the OVA in the 90s, where he was half lover, half best friend, half partner in the gang Bison. Like, it was kind of like a three-parter thing to him. In the 2012 OVA, they really don't go as far as to say, well, they might be sleeping together, but they're more so really close friends, and Guy really cares about Riki. It's more of a, he's a concerned friend, but not so bad. Now, the dialogue did kind of make me cringe, particularly a moment when they looked back on sort of the memories when Guy was talking to Riki after Riki had stolen like a really fancy bottle of liquor, and it was like, "What's up, man?" instead of just like the original dialogue and the 90s dialogue where he's like, "Hey, is everything all right?" Like, it's really concerning, and it's not like a "what's up, man." When his body language, none of his like being was like, "What's up, man?" It kind of reminds me of how they purposefully changed scripts and things like that in both Japan and American dubs, where like in Free they changed a lot of the dialogue to be like, "What's up, man?" sort of thing. It was really annoying because everybody, like even the voice actors in the Japanese dub of Free, would play on the aspect that they were very close guys and they were like borderline banging, and sort of that aspect in Chimera, which is Kodaku Kazuma Ranma's manga adaptation, where they made the VA for Chimera a woman instead of very like high-pitched androgynous male. Some of that stuff kind of annoys me in dubs, particularly American dubs, because you can see that sort of erasure of the gay aspect, and particularly in this sort of dub because it is a straight up yaoi, like a straight up like hardcore gay anime, but they're still trying to mask it like it's not. And that's also an issue I had with Riki's voice actor Darren Mitchell. Darren Mitchell didn't really deliver sort of that feeling, and I understood in like the first episode when he was in the room and he had to see Mimiya through a holographic sort of message, it was like the moans and stuff would probably be awkward because Riki is resisting. It's not really a pleasure thing, but at the same time it should be a sort of resistance pleasure. I don't know what that would mean. I don't know if anybody gets what I'm saying, but it sounded very flat, and it sounded like the voice actor who was doing it, Darren Mitchell, was very awkward doing it. You can tell that it wasn't something that he was just kind of gonna do and it was gonna be a performance. As to Japanese VAs, they're used to doing stuff like this all the time and don't have really qualms with it. But this particular like scenes with Darren Mitchell doing that, I enjoy his voice overall just on any anime when I've watched it, but he's also played like Stray Guys, so I couldn't really expect him to like nail a really good moan or something like that. But at the same time, I feel like he's not as versatile in like very sexually explorative characters like I would say Todd Haberkorn. And I just have to say, going back on that sentiment, Todd Haberkorn's performance was phenomenal. It was great. I loved how he had a serious tone and you almost couldn't recognize who he is. Only way I could recognize who he was based on sort of the voice pattern that he did when he kind of stepped out of the character just barely an inch. When he was in dialogue, he kind of just got back to his normal voice and then it switched right back. It's the only way I could tell, and I had to double check just to be sure by looking back at what the announcements were. Intermediate voices I thought that were fine. Kansei was a pretty flat and kind of really sad voice that I just couldn't get past. He was voiced by Michael Zekas, and I just couldn't get past. It was very flat. His delivery was flat. It wasn't very good at all. It was just kind of like, you could tell he was reading the script. You couldn't really feel like the sort of solemn sort of, I'm your servant. He's not a really by-the-book servant, which is what I gathered from that. And even Daryl's voice actor is the furniture in Yasun's home, voiced by Wai Chang, is very flat. It's flatter than Kansei, even though I understand that furniture is supposed to be like this emotionless being that is supposed to work under and take care of the pets while the blondies are away, and it's like, but he's super flat, like, and even his voice doesn't really immaculate any sort of emotion about like when he's discussing in his sort of self-dialogue and his monologuing in his brain about how he's like, why is Riki, a mongrel of the slums, not accepting his fate, you know, things like that. It's not really emotional. You can't really feel for Daryl. It's just kind of like he's reading by the book and it's like, why doesn't he accept this, blah blah blah, you know. It just seems very flat and dead, and that was one of the things that I felt like it was very impactful in the anime, particularly in the 2012 anime, aside from the 1990 anime, where basically it was more on what Daryl's motivation was for breaking, you know, the gate open for Riki. It was something where he was like, I harbor no regrets. It was all my fault. Please do not harm Riki in this situation. And it was a sort of a selfishness in a noble acting way. And it didn't really feel that in the dub. It was very cringe. I was able to get through like 6 minutes without just stopping and bursting out laughing. It was just really bad. It's same for Kansei. I really wish his dub would have been great because Kansei is a key figure in sort of getting Riki and Yasun to, you know, kind of, yeah, realize each other's like feelings and towards each other, even though, must I remind you, this is a Stockholm Syndrome based anime. It's still, he was a key figure and he sort of acted like the cold calculated man, the sort of underground king versus the sort of lapdog in the underground king for Yasun. he just didn't seem like, even with the servant, he didn't really seem like much emotion. It was harmful to listen to. My ears were definitely hurting. It was so bad. The worst one, I'd have to say, which is very ironic and sad, was Mimiya's voice actress. Mimiya's voice actress, I felt like it was the wrong tone, as well as her dialogue was so flat and bad. Like, this was so bad. This was worse than Jessica Nigri's Supersonico bad. Like, it was about at that level, if not a little worse. Her dialogue was horrible. Like, her begging to be with Riki, it was so bad. There was a time in that sequence when after they did it and the police grabbed them and that last sort of Riki, she didn't really deliver. It looked like it was a blooper. A lot of her voice acting in the scene seemed like they should have been left for bloopers. They weren't very good. They were extremely flat, and like when there was that one redeemable sort of moment where she was really getting into it after she was talking about she didn't want to have Jana's child in front of Raul, she was like, Riki, answer me, when he wouldn't look her way. That was about the only good thing. But as far as that, even with the Japanese sub, Mimiya's character, I could feel for her the fact that she got with Riki and she wanted to be in love with Riki because it gave her solace. This just made me feel annoyed and was like, man, she's using this guy. Like, it did not make me feel any sort of way about her. It was very annoying, and her voice was just, it was too deep for me, and it lacked any emotion. If her voice was still too deep, I would probably be chill with it if her voice like had some emotion, but it didn't. This girl was probably like, hey guys, what we reading? Okay, let me try this. Like 1 or 2 takes and done. I just feel like some of these dubs are really rushed unless they're like really good veteran voice actors. I don't know. It did not feel at all like what I would have expected. Now overall, I felt like the dub was pretty alright. A lot of Bison, the members of Bison, I loved Aisha, which is one of the blondie who looks more like a female than anything else with a sort of blue lipstick, who does have a huge sort of fascination with Riki, but doesn't really say much. Voiced by Melly Grant. I thought her voice was so solid. Like, and then that dialogue between them during Jupiter's first visit and warning to Yasone, it was so great. And I really, really liked it. I felt like Yasone's voice overall kind of sounded like a deep anime villain who might be like a power struggle. I feel like over time, especially if this was the 90s OVA being dubbed, Todd Haberkorn should like lighten his voice up. Like in that scene where he didn't want Riki to feel sorry for Daryl with the furniture and it would crush him, he kind of should have lightened his face a little bit, you know? Just lightened his voice a little bit, so that would seem like a little, is there a little genuine concern I sense? You know, sort of thing. It just kind of felt stagnant. And that's a lot of the problem with a lot of yaoi BL dubs, like Dramatical Murder, and the few others that have been dubbed. They are very flat, and I feel like a lot of the voice actors don't know what to do in the situation, because I probably imagine it's pretty embarrassing. It's about not too far down the scale from a hentai dub. It's not that great. It's very flat, and the voices just, they don't resonate with the emotions, and I think that's something voice actors really need to start working on, especially if they want to make more money, because I'm gonna tell you right now, as soon as yaoi dubs get really good dubs, us fangirls are gonna be buying. We're gonna be getting our coin because we want that good stuff. Like, we don't like having to look up stuff online. We like having the physical copies. That's why the doujin markets at conventions and things like that are piping hot, because we want that good money. We want what we pay for. If it's a good dub, then we are more likely to buy. And that is speaking as a fujoshi who enjoys buying the hard substance of the animes that I consume. I have mangas and the anime, and if they make really good dubs, which I feel like they should start small with their yaoi dubs, they make good dubs, we will enjoy them. And with that being said, I do have a few suggestions that I personally would like to give to sort of English VAs or companies that are dubbing that want to take on yaoi dubs and aren't really sure what would be best perceived by fans, if that's even a thing that they consider during the dubbing process, you know, versus what they feel is best. And here are a few tips that I think I could just throw in the hat and give to them. Now, one thing I think would be the most important thing is to actively try to get your voice actors into the practice of voicing and kind of having a bit more sort of high-pitched voices. And I know it's a really weird example to use, but like gravitation. Shuichi and Yuki's interactions, as Yuki being the more dominant force or the seme, whatever floats people's boats, and Shuichi being the submissive, more uke sort of status, the way that they are perceived in their English dub are pretty spot on. While sort of cringy on Shuichi's part, is very spot on. When there are times when Yuki has to show emotion, the voice actor for Yuki shows emotion. He sort of gets in that sort of mode where, like, for example, when Yuki starts crying thinking about the past, his voice changes and his voice kind of cracks and I had this I didn't want you to be hurt sort of thing, you know? And then Shuichi, when he wants to really be close to Yuki and he really has these weird just bursts of emotion where he starts to cry, his voice gets more high-pitched, it cracks. It's like, Yuki, why? Why, Yuki? Like, sort of things like that. I know I'm making a cringy, terrible impression of what I'm trying to portray, but I think that you all get the gist of what I'm saying. I think that there should be more thought and emotion put into these yaoi dubs, just like they're in, like, heterosexual dubs and yuri dubs. I think some yuri dubs are some of the most emotional and powerful things. For example, Utena Revolutionary Girl, one of the earliest dubs, kind of flat in some places, but as far as the emotions between Anthe and Utena, and even some of the male characters and their feelings for Utena and Anthe, you can feel the emotion. Like with Saionji, you can feel that Saionji is like, he's super arrogant and he's really, really a go-getter, and when he wants something, he's gonna get it, and when he gets angry, you can hear it in his voice, like, you think you can test me, sort of thing like that. And then when Anthe is like really crying out for help, like one of my favorite scenes in the dub for Utena is when Utena opens the coffin that was holding Anthe so that Akio could open the gates. When she opens the coffin sort of thing and Anthe says, "Get out of here, the sword," sort of thing, like she's really concerned for her, and then Utena's literally just, you can hear the strain in Utena's like English dub's voice actress, who's just like, Anthe, please, you know, like she's really trying to reach out and grab for her. And then when Anthe falls to the bottomless pit of the arena, you can hear the ah in her voice, like, you know, it's like that scream. And the emotion when Utena like regrets not being able to save Anthe the way she would have liked to, that sort of thing, it's what I like to see in yaoi. More emotion and more thought put in, and a lot more, because I feel like men can show emotion in these subs of Japanese dubs. They show plenty of emotion and you can feel the emotion in the animation, as opposed to having to kind of wonder like, I wonder what animation, and that really will put off the entire story. The second thing that I think that these dubbing companies should take into consideration is they should start small. I don't think they should go into things like No Kusabi, or they should go into things like Yachin Bitch Club. Like, they shouldn't go into anime like that that's super hardcore and like might as well be a hentai sort of thing. I think they should start small with things like, for example, Yuri on Ice. A lot of people like the Yuri on Ice dub, and it had a great start to it. There was that love and connection with Yuri's voice actor, as well as Victor's voice actor, who's Jerry Jewell, and while I wasn't really particularly a fan of his like accent in his performance, he still had that emotion that you want to see. And I think that's also because Funimation dubbed it, and even with Free, a lot of the voice actors in Free, like Nagisa's voice actor, Haru's voice actor, they sort of portrayed that same thing. Sort of like Mignano's voice actor, I'm still a little on the fence, they still had that like emotion into their dialogue. I think a great adaptation to be made, if they can get licensing, is for Dokusei. Dokusei is a very sort of small, very simple, shonen-ai, boys love anime that I'm sure they could easily get the license for, because Nakamura Asumiko isn't a very popular mangaka, and I'm sure just licensing that would get her back on the map, because she does have a live-action adaptation that just dropped as well. I'm not sure if it officially dropped, but it was in the works for Doublemans, so that would put it on the map. And it was a really big theatrical kind of thing in both Japan and the United States. Dokusei is a very simple dub. I could imagine Kusakabe's voice actor could be someone like, if they wanted a big name, somebody like Todd Haberkorn to play like Saito. I feel like Todd Haberkorn would be a great glasses character for Saito, who's very calm, collected, but at the same time has this like sort of, you know, talk about him. And for Kusakabe, they could get somebody like Johnny Yambosh, which would be perfectly relatable, because Johnny Yambosh has his own band. He has a very Baishonen sort of voice where it's like early adolescence to like young adult, young male sort of voice. I think it would be amazing to put. Or if they wanted to go with someone who is like a smaller voice, they could do that. But I think they should put someone who's very comfortable and well versed into going in, and if they have to kind of moan and do sort of emotions that they need be. And I feel like that would be a very good selling point to get a lot more Blu-ray sales, a lot more streaming, you know, investments into it if you added more English dubbed BL into the mix. It's working well for ecchi anime, it's working well for yuri anime. If you just add that to the roster, I think that a lot more fujoshis or just casual yaoi fans in general would just be fine and would want to explore more into the dubs, and that would actually help gateway a few things. And with the success of the Yuri on Ice dub, that was already a great example of BL being more widely accepted in both the dub and sub format. And I feel like that's just something that I will continuously be on the search for. I will laugh at this though. The first yaoi themed anime English dubbed, when fake OVA was one of the top yaoi English VAs. They were voiced. I don't know, this isn't the first yaoi themed anime that was dubbed in English, but overall I would give No Kusabi's English dub around a like 6 out of 10, because 6 out of 10 I feel like is pretty generous considering there was a decent amount of dubs versus that very not too much outweighed, but it was a pretty good balance between bad dubs in this series versus good dubs. But I feel like I said, let's add a few more experienced dubbings. We should kind of train them, because the sort of BL, GL, LGBT markets for anime is only growing, and that means there's going to be more to be dubbed. So you kind of want to get your voice actors trained in that aspect, and those who don't want to do it, that's perfectly fine, but those who would seek out doing it, kind of get them trained into it. Because I can only imagine somebody who voices like commercials or like regular TV shows being told, hey, here's a hentai script, whether it be gay, straight, lesbian, whatever, and say, hey, here's a hentai script, voice it. And you do it, and you do it the best you can, but you kind of don't. You don't really get the feel for it, or you feel like it's too cringy, or you get this automatic in the back of your head sort of embarrassment sort of from it. I feel like you just kind of train them to be normal, like I guess the Japanese voice actors, the Japanese seiyus do it, you know? So I just feel like that's something that could be done. Other than that, I have no real bad complaints about it. I feel like they did the best that they could, and that they kind of revived something that we kind of felt was disappointing because it kind of died. It felt like No Kusabi's 2012 OVA died prematurely before its time. It stopped at a really awkward place, and all of us fans were really hoping they'd finish the series as a whole, but I guess it wasn't selling like they thought it would, so they kind of stopped it. But I feel like this dub, worst case scenario, was a learning experience for future dubs. Best case scenario, was something that revived a bit of a stagnant anime and rehyped us for what's to come next. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching this episode. I'm glad I've come out of the hiatus. I just came back from Anime Week in Atlanta. I was Cesar Clown and Gangster Gastino. If you have seen me, let me know if you got pics with me. I know a lot of people saw me from my YouTube video, plus my cosplay, plus my art. They were really excited. I met a lot of you cool guys out there. I was so excited. The next con I'll probably be attending is Seishun Con, which is like a smaller con. So if you live out of state, I would not recommend going to this con because it is a very small con. A very, very small con. But other than that, I have a few more videos up in the way. Speaking of yaoi, I actually have a whole yaoi analysis sort of response video to a fellow YouTuber who did a yaoi analysis video, and I have some positives and some negatives. But overall, I think I want to just put this fujoshi sort of misconception to bed, and I hope you'll be with me for that. And with that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I do hope you enjoy my future videos in the runtime. And with that being said, guys, peace, love, and stay groovin', humans. Bye!